We tend to picture the universe as, this smooth, flowing river. But what if that's not the whole story? What if reality is actually full of these little jumps and gaps and sudden shifts? Today we're going to explore this wild idea, that these so-called discontinuities aren't flaws at all. In fact, they might just be clues to a much deeper, hidden order.
Okay, let's just jump right in with something that might bend your brain a little, and it comes from quantum physics. So, an electron in an atom, right? It can't just hang out wherever it wants. It has to be in these very specific energy levels. But get this, it can leap from one level to another instantly, without ever passing through the space in between. I mean, imagine being on the first floor of a building 1 second and the third floor the next, without ever being on the second. So, is that a glitch? A flaw in the system?
Well, before we can even answer that, we have to agree on what a flaw even is. It's not just about something being broken. For our purposes today, a flaw is when something has the potential to be or do something, but it's blocked. Think of a seed. It has all the potential to become a giant tree, but if it doesn't get any water, that potential is blocked. That's a flaw.
So if a flaw is a blocked potential, then perfection is pretty much the opposite, right? It's the ability to just work, to function with this perfect, uninterrupted consistency. It always does what it's supposed to do, no hiccups, no interruptions. So with that in mind, let's go back to our big question. Is the universe flawed? Or is there a kind of perfection here that we're just not seeing? At first glance, things can seem pretty chaotic, pretty random. But is that the real story? Or is there maybe an underlying pattern, some kind of hidden order that connects everything? That's what we're going to dig into next.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. You've got these two big ideas battling it out. On one side, you have the consistency of chaos. Think about flipping a coin. Any single flip is totally random, but if you flip it 1,000 times, you're going to get heads about half the time. That's a recognizable, repeating pattern inside the randomness. But is that real order? Or for true stability, do you need something more fundamental? A consistency of order that's holding the whole thing together?
And here's the argument our source material makes, and it's a powerful one. It says chaos can't be the foundation of everything. For randomness to even have a pattern, it has to be built on top of something that isn't random. So in this view, order is the cause, and chaos is just the effect. It's like chaos is just the ripples on the surface of a much deeper, much more orderly ocean.
Okay, so if order is the foundation, what does that look like? How does it all stack up? The next part lays out this incredible chain of dependence. It's like a set of logical dominoes that show us what reality is really built on.
Let's walk through this, because it's pretty cool. For anything to be consistent, it has to repeat itself, right? Think of a heartbeat. Its consistency is in its repetition. Okay, and for something to repeat, it needs to be part of a cycle. The heartbeat is part of the whole cycle of circulation. And for a cycle to happen, something has to exist in the first place. But what's the most basic component of existence itself? The argument here is that it's discontinuity. That constant, repeating pattern of something flashing into being and then out again. It's the exact same repeating pattern we saw with those quantum leaps, just on a cosmic scale.
Now this idea of a fundamental repeating discontinuity at the very heart of existence, it's not just something you find in philosophy or physics, it has really deep roots in theology too. So now we're going to look at a parallel perspective from the Quran, which honestly takes this whole thing to an even deeper level.
The first key principle from this Quranic viewpoint is that everything in creation is temporary. Nothing lasts forever. Everything has a beginning, and everything will have an end. It pops into existence, and eventually it will cease to exist.
And this definition right here highlights a really critical point. If something isn't eternal, well, that means there had to be a time when it just wasn't there. It had to come from a state of non-existence. It didn't just magic itself into being.
So if all of creation isn't eternal and it all came from a state of non-existence, it follows logically that it can't sustain itself. It has to be completely dependent on an eternal source just to keep existing. It's kind of like a light bulb. It's not lit on its own. It needs a constant supply of electricity to stay on.
So look at this. We've got two completely different ways of understanding the world, quantum physics and the Quran, and they both arrive at this incredibly similar conclusion. Physics talks about a functional discontinuity, the jump between energy states. The Quran talks about an existential discontinuity, this constant cycle of being brought into existence from nothing. But both point to reality that isn't smooth, it's built on jumps and gaps, a repeating pattern at the very core of what it means to be.
And this theological view just takes that idea all the way. It suggests that existence wasn't a one-time event, like a big bang that just got everything started. No, it's happening right now. in every single moment. Creation is constantly being brought into being from nothingness and returning to it in this endless repeating cycle of nothing being nothing. It's that same pattern again, but at the most fundamental level you can possibly imagine.
So what does this all mean? If reality is really built on this constant, repeating pattern of appearing and disappearing, what does that tell us about the universe itself? The answer, from the perspective we're exploring, is, well, it's pretty profound.
And here is the big twist. That endless repeating pattern of discontinuity, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's not a flaw in the universe at all. In fact, it's the ultimate sign of creation's incredible weakness. It's total dependence. The fact that the universe has to be constantly rebooted moment by moment shows that it's so weak, it's almost non-existent. It literally cannot hold itself together.
From this point of view, the universe is kind of like a movie being projected, one frame at a time. Each and every moment is a brand new act of creation, brought into being by a continuous divine command, which is summed up in the Quranic phrase, kun fayakun, be, and it is. So the universe's greatest weakness, the fact that it can't exist on its own, becomes the absolute strongest proof that it's a creation, constantly depending on a creator who is completely beyond that cycle.
So we end up right back where we started, but with a new question. We began by asking if the universe is flawed, but maybe the real question is this: what if its greatest weakness is actually its strongest proof? What if that constant repeating pattern of discontinuity we see everywhere isn't a sign of imperfection, but a constant blinking sign pointing to the fact that the universe isn't the whole show? That's something to think about.